All right, let's get into it. We're about to tackle one of the most ruthless and, let's be honest, one of the most unsettling laws in the entire book. Law 15, crush your enemy totally. Now, this has nothing to do with being a good sport or winning gracefully. This law makes the chilling argument that in the high stakes game of power, your very survival depends on an absolute, uncompromising, and total victory.
It feels wrong, doesn't it? A win should be a win. But this law forces us to ask a really tough question. What if leaving an opponent standing, even after you've beaten them, is the single biggest mistake you could possibly make? What if that little bit of mercy you show today is actually just planting the seeds of your own destruction tomorrow?
And right here, the judgment of the law lays it out in the starkest possible terms. This isn't a suggestion, it's a warning, one that's been proven right over centuries of history. The core idea is that an enemy you leave alive, no matter how weak they seem, is like a single smoldering ember in a bone-dry forest. You might turn your back thinking the fire's out, but all it needs is a little bit of oxygen, a little time, a little resentment to flare right back up, and this time it's going to be way more ferocious than before. So let's really dig into this idea of the smoldering ember, because it is the central metaphor for this entire law. It's all about understanding a fundamental truth. A defeated enemy is not a grateful one. They are a wounded one. And a wounded animal is almost always the most dangerous. And this right here, this is the paradox that makes this law so tricky. In the world of power, a partial victory is actually a strategic failure. Think about it. You've done enough harm to create this burning desire for revenge, but you haven't done enough to actually stop them from getting it. You've basically just created a mortal enemy who now has absolutely nothing left to lose. And to see just how badly this can play out, we need to look at a classic historical mistake.
To really see this in action, we've got to go back to ancient China. Our story is about two rival generals, Xiang Yu and Liu Peng. Both of them were fighting to control the entire empire. One was this incredible warrior who believed in honor above all else. The other was a cunning strategist who just understood people. Only one of them truly got Law 15.
Okay, so on one side, you've got Shang Yu. Picture the classic noble warrior, incredibly powerful, super proud, maybe a little arrogant. He's all about honorable combat. Then on the other side, you've got Liu Peng, a guy who came from nothing, a peasant. He wasn't the better soldier, not by a long shot, but he was a master of human psychology. He was slippery, he was adaptable, and he knew that in a real fight for survival, honor is a luxury you just can't afford. And these two different mindsets would directly lead to their very different fates.
It's almost painful to watch. Xiang Yu had Liu Peng dead to rights, again and again. First, he just hesitates and lets Liu Peng capture a key city. Then, he throws this banquet where he has the perfect chance to assassinate his rival, but he just can't bring himself to give the signal. Liu Peng, of course, escapes. Later, Xiang Yu even captures Liu Peng's own father and threatens to boil him alive. And Liu Peng's response is just legendary. He basically says, "Go for it, but when you're done, send me a bowl of the soup." He knew Xiang Yu's so-called honor wouldn't let him do it. Each time he showed mercy, each hesitation, that was another ember Xiang Yu left smoldering. And eventually, all those embers burst into a massive inferno that completely destroyed him.
So this story of Xiang Yu just begs the question, why? Why is mercy, this thing we're all taught as a virtue, so unbelievably dangerous in the world of power? His story isn't just some old tale. It's a really deep dive into the psychology of conflict and, more importantly, the psychology of revenge. See, when you defeat an enemy but you let them go, they don't feel gratitude. They feel humiliation. Your act of kindness is a constant nagging reminder of their weakness and of your power over them. This doesn't lead to peace. It inspires this all-consuming desire to flip that script. You haven't made a friend. You've created a nemesis, someone whose entire life's purpose might now just be your downfall.
And centuries before this book was even a thought, Machiavelli understood this perfectly. His point is, well, it's chillingly logical. If you hurt someone a little, they will plot revenge. They'll wait for their moment. But if you inflict a great injury, total annihilation, you completely remove their ability to ever retaliate. It's a brutal, cold calculation, but it is absolutely central to the logic of this law.
And if you need a mental image for this whole idea, the book gives us a perfect one. A wounded snake you nurse back to health will not thank you. By showing mercy, you are basically nursing that snake. You're giving it time to heal, time for its venom to replenish and get even more potent. You're giving it the chance to strike again, and you can be sure that when it does, it will not hold back. So, if Xiang Yu is our textbook example of what not to do, who got it right? Who is our master of the law? For that, we turn to another amazing figure from Chinese history, someone who understood that to get power and to keep it, there could be absolutely no half measures. Meet Empress Wu. She started at the absolute bottom rung of the imperial ladder as a low-level concubine. The court back then was a complete viper's nest of ambition, betrayal, and backstabbing. For a woman with literally zero political power, just surviving was a daily battle. But here's the thing. Empress Wu didn't just want to survive, she wanted to rule. And her path to power is a masterclass in total annihilation. First, to get rid of her main rival, the sitting empress, she allegedly smothers her own infant child and then frames the empress for the murder. It is shockingly brutal. Then, when she achieves her goal and becomes empress herself, she doesn't stop. She knows enemies are everywhere, so she begins the purge. Over many, many years, she patiently and methodically eliminates every single potential threat, not just the person, but their entire families and their networks. By the time she finally takes the throne and declares her own dynasty, there is simply no one left to challenge her. She had crushed every last single ember.
What's so fascinating about Wu is that for her, this wasn't just about being cruel, it was about survival. In the razor's edge world of the court, any rival she left alive would have eventually come for her. She understood what Hung Yu didn't, that power isn't maintained through noble gestures. It's maintained through the cold, calculated, and complete neutralization of every single threat.
Okay, so we've seen what happens when you ignore the law, and we've seen what happens when you master it. Now, let's try to boil this down to its core principles, and also talk about the potential downsides. Because can this law ever blow up in your face? This next quote is about as blunt as it gets when it comes to this law. The story goes that on his deathbed, a 19th century Spanish general was asked by a priest if he forgave his enemies. His reply, "I do not have to forgive my enemies, I have had them all shot." I mean, that is the ultimate expression of Law 15. The only real peace you can have with an enemy comes from their permanent absence. So what does applying this law actually look like? Well, according to the source material, it means you don't negotiate a truce. You just keep pushing forward until the enemy is scattered and broken, with absolutely no hope of ever recovering. You don't just win the battle, you salt the earth behind you so that nothing and no one can ever grow back to challenge you again. The goal is to make their defeat so total that the very idea of revenge becomes impossible. But, and this is a big but, this is where we have to stop and think critically. The law seems so absolute, so final, but is it always the right move? Is there ever a time when crushing an enemy totally is actually the wrong thing to do? And this brings us to the really important concept of the reversal. So the reversal suggests that if you crush an enemy, but you don't completely wipe them off the map, you can accidentally create a generation of martyrs. You might win the war today, but in doing so, you plant the seeds of resentment so deep that you all but guarantee another, maybe even deadlier war down the line. And the source material gives us the perfect and most tragic example of this, the Treaty of Versailles after World War I. The terms of that treaty were designed to absolutely crush Germany, economically, militarily, and psychologically. But here's the key. Germany wasn't annihilated. The nation itself was left standing, just simmering in this deep, nationwide humiliation and bitterness. And that resentment festered for 2 decades, creating the perfect fertile ground for extremist ideologies and ultimately the rise of Hitler and the Second World War. It was a victory so punishing, yet so incomplete, that it basically guaranteed a catastrophic sequel. So, where does that leave us? Well, the law acknowledges this risk, the risk of the reversal, but its final verdict is still crystal clear. Leniency is almost always the bigger mistake. The core argument holds: crush your enemy. But it adds this chilling little warning. If you do choose a path of partial victory, like what happened at Versailles, you have to understand you haven't achieved peace. You have created a permanent, deep-seated enemy, and you can never, ever let your guard down. And this is the question this law really leaves us with. Obviously, we're not generals or emperors. But in the modern world, in business, in politics, even in our personal rivalries, we all face opponents. So when you're dealing with a competitor in the market or a rival at work who's actively trying to undermine you, what does crushing them even mean? This law forces us to confront a really uncomfortable truth, that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can possibly do is not see a conflict through to its absolute decisive end. It's a dark thought for sure, but it's a principle of power that has shaped history for thousands of years.